The moment Catherine Waverly saw the girl's necklace, her entire world stopped. 1 second, she was lifting her wine glass. The next, she was staring, frozen, silent, at the gold pendant hanging just below Jader's collarbone. A delicate charm shaped like a crescent moon and etched with a single initial L. 16-year-old Chase Waverly beamed beside her, proudly introducing the girl he had brought home. "Mom, Dad, this is Jader." Jada offered a soft smile, her voice steady despite the tension clinging to the room. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Waverly." Catherine didn't answer. Her gaze didn't move from the necklace. Robert Waverly, seated at the head of the table, cleared his throat. "And how did you two meet?" "At the Lincoln shelter," Chase replied quickly. "She teaches coding to younger kids. That's where I volunteer." "Amazing," Robert murmured, forcing a smile. Catherine finally blinked and set her glass down, untouched. "Excuse me," she said, rising slowly. Her voice had gone cold, almost brittle. "I'll be back in a moment." She turned and walked out of the room stiffly, one hand reaching up, not for composure, but for her own necklace hidden beneath her blouse. Something was very, very wrong. Catherine Waverly didn't stop until she reached the master suite. She shut the door, locked it, and opened the antique jewelry box on her dresser with trembling hands. Buried beneath pearls and diamonds was a necklace nearly identical to the one Jader wore. A gold crescent moon, etched with the same single letter, L. She hadn't seen that symbol in almost 2 decades. In the dining room, the atmosphere had thinned, but only just. Jader sipped water quietly while Chase rambled to fill the silence. "She's into AI and robotics too, Mom. I mean, she's applying to Columbia." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Impressive." Jader nodded. "I've always loved solving puzzles." Robert gave a small, polite smile, but his eyes flickered again to her necklace. "That's a beautiful piece. Family heirloom." Jader looked down. "Actually, no. I don't know where it came from." "You don't?" "I grew up in foster care. The necklace was the only thing found with me as a baby." The room went still. Robert exchanged a glance with the empty doorway where Catherine had disappeared. Jader didn't notice. She was still staring down at the gold charm, completely unaware it had just opened a door no one in that house ever wanted to walk through again. Catherine stood at the bathroom sink, running cold water over her wrists, her breath shaky and uneven. She hadn't thought about that night in years. The rain, the screaming, the decision they swore never to speak of again. And now a girl shows up in her home wearing that necklace. She gripped the counter, fighting to stay upright. Downstairs, Chase was completely unaware. He was too busy watching Jader laugh softly, nervously, as she recounted a story about one of her coding students accidentally triggering a robot to spin in circles. "It wouldn't stop," she said with a grin. "We had to unplug the whole panel." Robert chuckled politely, but his mind was spinning. He had seen that necklace before in a hospital wrapped in a blood-soaked blanket. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the hall. Catherine returned, calm and cold as porcelain. She took her seat with a tight smile. "Sorry, just needed to check a message." "Everything okay?" Chase asked. "Of course," she said. But then she turned to Jader and asked flatly, "Have you ever tried to trace your birth parents?" Jader's face dropped. She hesitated. "I used to," she whispered. "But I stopped when someone warned me to let it go." There was a silence so thick Chase could feel it pressing against his ribs. "Someone warned you?" he repeated, leaning in. Jader nodded. "Yeah, it was about 3 years ago. I filed a request for non-identifying records. The next week, I got a typed note in the mail. No return address, just one sentence." "What did it say?" Robert asked, his voice low. Jader glanced between them. It said, "Stop digging. Some graves are sealed for a reason." Catherine's knuckles turned white around her wine glass. "And you just stopped?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I was 15. It scared me. I figured maybe my parents were dangerous or powerful, so I let it go." Jader looked away, embarrassed. "I just told myself the past didn't matter." Chase reached for her hand under the table. "It matters," he said. Robert cleared his throat. "You said the necklace came with you as a baby. Do you still have any of the paperwork from the system?" Jader blinked. "Only a copy. Why? Would you be willing to let us see it?" he asked too quickly. Catherine shot him a sharp look, but Jader just shrugged. "Sure, it's at my apartment." Catherine's voice cracked the room in half. "I want to see it tonight." An hour later, Chase pulled up outside Jader's tiny apartment in a quiet part of Southside Chicago. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. From penthouse ceilings to creaky floorboards, Catherine and Robert had insisted on coming. Catherine said she wanted clarity. Robert hadn't said anything at all. Jader apologized for the mess, even though her place was spotless. Books stacked neatly, a small potted plant on the windowsill, and an old laptop charging on a makeshift desk made from stacked crates. "It's in here," she said, retrieving a slim manila folder from a fireproof box under her bed. "It's not much. Just intake notes and a faded medical report." She handed it to Catherine, who opened it with trembling fingers. The top page was a hospital report. Female, infant, African-American, approx 5 days, found abandoned near Lincoln Park shelter, wearing crescent moon necklace. "No injuries, no witnesses," Catherine's breath caught. Beneath it was a social worker's note dated 2007. Infant appeared healthy. Anonymous caller reported location. Caller's voice, female, mid-30s, possibly educated, refused to give a name, said, "She's safer without me." Robert stepped back as if struck. Catherine sat down slowly on the edge of Jader's couch. She wasn't blinking. She was whispering. "Oh my God, it was you!" Chase looked between them, confused. "Wait, what do you mean, Mom?" "What's going on?" Catherine didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the folder in her lap, as if it had dragged a ghost out of her chest. Jader stood frozen, one hand gripping the side of her desk. "You recognize this, don't you?" Robert asked quietly. He wasn't looking at Jader, he was staring at his wife. Catherine finally spoke, her voice low and cracking. "That necklace, it's not just similar. It's the same. I had one just like it made years ago." Before she stopped. "Before what?" Chase asked, now rising, panic rising in his throat. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "Before the baby." Jader's lips parted, stunned. "What baby?" Catherine stood up too fast. "This isn't the time. This isn't the place." Jader stepped back, her voice shaking. "I think I have the right to know." Catherine turned to her son. "Chase, she may be your sister." Silence, heavy, unforgiving. "No," Jader whispered, stepping back like she'd been slapped. "That's not possible." But Catherine wasn't denying it. Robert sat down, burying his face in his hands. Chase just stood there, everything tilting out from under him. "No," Chase said again, louder this time. "No, that can't be right. That's insane." Jader had stepped into the corner of the room, arms crossed tight over her chest like she was holding herself together by force. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Catherine stayed silent, but her face said everything. She looked like she had aged a decade in 5 minutes. "I was 20, she said finally. "I was in college. I wasn't married yet. I wasn't ready. My parents threatened to disown me if I kept the baby. So I made the worst decision of my life." She looked at Jader now. "They told me you were adopted. I didn't even know where you ended up, but I couldn't bear the thought of you having nothing. So I left the necklace. That was all I had." Jader's voice was icy. "You abandoned me. I hated myself every day for it." Chase turned to his mother, voice hollow. "And you never told me?" Robert finally spoke, his voice brittle. "I found out 2 years after we married," she told me in tears. "I promised never to bring it up again." "But she's not your daughter," Catherine whispered. "She's mine, but not ours." And then Robert asked what no one else dared to. "Are you sure?" The next morning was quiet. Jader didn't sleep. She sat on her bed, knees drawn to her chest, clutching the necklace she once thought was just a pretty charm. Her world had flipped in one evening. She didn't know who to trust herself, least of all. A knock at her door startled her. It was Chase alone. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He handed her a small envelope. "A private DNA lab. They'll come to you." "No records? No publicity, no drama." Jader stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "You still think I might be your sister?" she asked softly. "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "But I know I want the truth." "Whatever it is." She took the envelope finally. Back at the Waverly penthouse, Catherine sat at the dining table, silent. Robert paced, phone in hand. "She hates me," Catherine whispered. I saw it in her eyes. "She's allowed to," Robert replied. "But that doesn't mean this ends in hate." A few hours later, the DNA technician came and went. 3 days passed. Then a single email arrived in Jader's inbox. She opened it slowly, heart pounding. 99.9% probability of a direct maternal relationship to Catherine Waverly. And below that, no paternal match to Robert Waverly. Catherine stood alone on the rooftop garden of Waverly Tower, clutching the original necklace she'd hidden for nearly 2 decades. The DNA results had confirmed what she already knew deep down. But the lack of Robert's paternity changed everything. "I failed her twice," she whispered. "Once when I gave her away, and again when I met her and saw nothing but shame." Behind her, Jader appeared.